Welcome to the Marlowe Show. I'm glad you're here. We had a big episode today because we spent the whole time with my friend Peter Schweizer. Of course, October the 7th, so we talk a lot about that 2-year anniversary since the Hamas jihadis unleashed the attack against innocent Israelis that has led us to this point now, where we could be on the verge of Middle East peace, we hope, but no major developments in the last 24 hours, so we'll see how that goes. We also get into what the billionaire class is up to, as Peter's always following the money. He gives his analysis of the TikTok deal, and we get into where lawfare could legitimately be used to slow down the resistance to President Trump and to hold some of the bad guys accountable. So it's awesome. He's the absolute best. There's just no one better than Peter, and we spend the whole show with him. You might see my background is a little different because I happen to be in Washington, D.C., doing an event with the American Beverage Association tomorrow, and I'll tell you, you guys know we're all about Maha on the show, and I got a recommendation for you. I got an idea for you. You guys have heard about fad diets and over the years, juice cleanses, cabbage diets, raw food diets. All this stuff comes and goes, but by the time the average person hits 60, they've lost or regained several hundred pounds. And we honestly have no idea what kind of damage this gaining and losing weight is doing to us. Doctors call this weight cycling, and half of Americans do it. And if you do it enough, you could be risking diabetes, liver damage, heart attack, stroke. And honestly, we don't know. It's so new. We've never done this before to ourselves. Weight cycling is when you lose 10 pounds or more, and then you put it back on. Maybe you lose it again, and you put it back on. This puts tremendous strains on your organs, and it can lead to serious health issues. And the bottom line, that most people need to stop it. They need to stop weight cycling. And here's a great way to try. It's non-prescription lean. It was created by doctors. Lean's an oral supplement, so it's not a GLP. It's not a fat shot, injectable. And the science is very impressive. Its studied ingredients also target weight loss in 3 powerful ways. Helps maintain healthy blood sugar, helps control appetite and cravings, and it helps burn fat by converting it to energy. Burning fat helps keep the weight off. So if you want to lose meaningful weight at a healthy pace and keep it off, give lean a try in your diet and add that to your healthy lifestyle with exercise, etc. And you get 20% off. Enter the code MARLOWE when you go to takelean.com. Take lean, L-E-A-N, takelean.com. Promo code MARLOWE gets you 20% off. No reason not to try this. Could help you out. Could be exactly what you need. Let's get into it with Peter Schweizer. All right, Ellison friends today, and there's no better friend than Peter Schweizer, a colleague, a mentor, and a 4-time number 1 New York Times bestselling author. We got 4 number ones, Peter, to go with all of your. Is that right? Is that right?
That's right. Thank you.
4 is a lot. That's a lot. The Government Accountability Institute is his think tank, which is necessary, does incredible work, and I would say also trains up a lot of the best researchers that we got. The Drilldown podcast, as you guys know, is a must listen for me, and it's free for now. That's what you could probably squeeze us for the $5 or whatever, Peter, a month. So I'm not trying to give you too many ideas, but you probably could squeeze us. Those in the loyal audience, but everyone should listen to that, especially while it's free. Peter, I got a lot that I want to get to with you today, but I feel like I want to start with Shutdown because I was thinking about you're a follow the money guy, so you know how much waste is in Washington. You know how the permanent political class just lives to take our money and then waste it and spend it on things that they shouldn't. And I was thinking that we're in this moment where, as we're talking today, the government is shut down, so to speak. If you're Russ Vogt, what are you cutting? What are you going around and just taking the red pen saying, this is gone, this is gone? Is there anything that's just the first thing for you that is just, there's no good that comes of this, and now it's time to get rid of it?
Yeah, I mean, I would start with the Department of Education. I remember a story. This was about a government shutdown about 15 years ago when the determination was made. There were some snowstorms that went through Washington, D.C. And so they said only essential government workers needed to show up to work because of the weather. And I think at the Department of Education, 93% of the employees were deemed non-essential and could just stay home. So my view is you should start with that, right? If there's a bad snowstorm and people don't have to show up to do their job, those people should probably be considered to be on the chopping block. So I think Department of Education would be a great place to start. I think there's a lot of other government agencies where the same thing applies. And this is a great opportunity. A guy like Russ Vogt, very smart, very determined, and I think this is a great opportunity to chip away. It's also a way of getting at, you've got the sort of normal waste and abuse. Then you've got the sort of constituency services where a lot of government programs are being run really to service certain voter constituencies. So I would also be looking at, certain block grants that the Department of Education gives out, and I would just eliminate some of those as well. That'd be a great department to begin with.
Yeah, I think that is a great department to begin with, and it just makes you think of how many others are probably of 93% of people who don't need to be there. And I think about this concept about the way the governments are the way the Democrats are behaving in the shutdown, where it just feels like the origin of the shutdown is that AOC decided she could run for Senate. Like literally that's all, and thus we have the shutdown because now Chuck Schumer thinks that maybe he'll lose his job, perhaps in leadership, perhaps losing a primary to AOC in New York. And it makes me think maybe that's why we're doing all this. And so the far left has the Democrats at gunpoint right now. And it just reminds me that they can't have their workers lose jobs, and the government workers tend to vote Democrat. And I just think that this reminds you something so fundamental, that government jobs is a jobs program for Democrat voters. And I feel like that's got to be just a huge part of our government, is just a program for Democrats to get jobs.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Alex. I mean, here's the paradox of the situation. I think Chuck Schumer probably didn't want to do the shutdown, but felt he had to because the progressive wing of the party has adopted the posture of like no cooperation whatsoever with the Trump administration. It doesn't matter if it's, fixing America because a hurricane has plowed through it. We're going to have non-cooperation, permanent resistance to the Trump administration. And they're prepared to do that to the extent that it actually damages their core constituency, which are federal workers. The surveys that I've seen, probably from 2022, 80% of federal government workers, that does not include enlisted, military personnel, but 80% of government employees vote Democratic. So they are literally destroying their own voter base in the name of non-cooperation with Donald Trump. That's how paradoxical it's become. And I think that this is not only dumb for them from the standpoint of damaging their own base, it's also tactically a terrible decision, because I think there's a lot of swing voters in the middle. They want the two sides to try to work together to some extent. And when you adopt the position that the progressives have, that we are just not going to cooperate with Donald Trump under any circumstances, it damages their standing with swing voters. It helps them with the base, but it damages them with swing voters. And swing voters broke hard for Donald Trump in 2024 in those swing states, in other areas, and further entrenching the progressive vote is not going to help them win elections. So it's I think, a dumb move tactically, but one that creates a great opportunity for the Trump administration to really, gut some things that need to be gutted.
It's interesting because they don't have a real leader. They're sort of leaderless right now, and it feels like that this could be one of the results of that. This is the way they're handling the shutdown, because it feels like people who only hang out in New York, like most of the Democrat leadership, might feel like this is good, this is righteous, but they don't seem to have any specific asks. I don't really know what they're asking for. They're asking for something maybe when it comes to healthcare or something, but what do you think they're actually asking for? Because it feels like the main objection is maybe illegal aliens getting government-run healthcare, but they can't decide their messaging on that. And the other one is whether or not Medicaid should be confined to people who, if you're eligible, if you have the ability to work, you should work in order to qualify for it, which, again, seems pretty good. I don't know who would disagree with that, but maybe some Democrats do.
Yeah. No, I think those are the details that they are discussing and saying that they're fighting over. But I think it's much broader than that. And I think the distinction that the progressives are making is that we should view ourselves as the resistance, not as the opposition party, but as the actual resistance, which makes it much more, militant, much more oppositional than simply being the other party. And I think that's kind of where it's going. And again, I mean, you, I think, pointed it out well. A lot of these progressives tend to hang around people like themselves. They're not hanging around swing voters. They're not hanging around, people that are potentially persuadable to vote Democratic in the midterm. They're hanging around people themselves. And when your rhetoric paints a picture of Donald Trump as Hitler, or at least Mussolini, and that the Republicans are kind of, carrying water for him. Well, who wants to compromise with Hitler or Mussolini? You've got to be in resistance. So they've almost talked themselves into this corner of zero cooperation on any front. And that just never does well. Even when in the past, when Republicans have been involved in shutdown activities against a Democratic president, whether it was Obama or Bill Clinton, that did not go well for the Republicans either. People tend to view that, keeping the government open is not a great battlefield upon which they want to have these battles fought. So I don't think they exactly know what they want. I think this is more about tone and posture than it is about the details. And if they can squeeze something that looks like a win, they're going to be happy with it. But I don't think Trump's going to give them a win. I think Trump is ready for this fight, and he's prepared to let this thing drag out.
All right, so Mark Short, who was the chief of staff for Vice President Pence, was saying that the Republicans are going to cave to Democrats on healthcare. Would we be caving? What is the request that I don't even know what they're asking for that we would cave on. It feels like Republicans are not going to cut off our nose to spite our face when it comes to healthcare. We want people to have healthcare that's better for the country in general. So I just don't think we're going to do anything colossally stupid politically. But I don't know, what would a cave look like?
Well, a cave would look like extending all these subsidies for the Obamacare program. That's really the crux of it, and allowing people, including people who are in the country illegally, to buy this health insurance, which is subsidized by taxpayers. That's what a cave would look like. And I think what Mark Short is essentially saying is he thinks that the pressure is going to build and you're going to get Republicans, particularly in the Senate, to eventually agree to extend it just to get the government refunded. And that's possible. I don't track the Senate that close, but I don't see the Trump administration compromising on it. And I think that, this point was made in the Wall Street Journal, which again is not necessarily MAGA central, but their point was, look, if they cave on this issue, then Obamacare and all the problems with Obamacare, all the failed promises of Obamacare, which are essentially owned now by Democrats, would suddenly now be owned by Republicans as well, because they were the ones that would have rescued this program that has not been working well and has not lived up to promise. So I'm skeptical. Maybe you're going to have some senators flop. I don't think you're going to get that from the Trump administration. I don't think you're going to get that from the House. I think what you may end up getting is kicking the can down the road, saying, okay, we're going to address this issue, in the spring, or we're going to address this issue in January. But eventually you're going to hit this line, and you're going to have to hold the line, I think, on this issue, because Obamacare has failed. It's not done what people said it was going to do. It has not held down costs. It does not. I know people that are on these programs, they're self-employed and this is the best option they have. They're just not good, and they're bureaucratic, and they're inefficient, and they should be replaced. And there have been some very good proposals by Republicans on what it should be replaced with. That ought to be the future, not rescuing this program.
Okay, I think that's good. So it's I'm really interested to see where the messaging goes from here, because it just feels as though the Democrats are just trying to be resistant at all costs, but if they cave and they end up opening up the government, which I feel like they're going to have to, then how are they going to message that next? And that's what I'm really excited about, because that could get pretty hilarious. I got to admit that could be pretty funny. Peter, you've been the number one person to warn us against TikTok as a CCP spy app, which it is. I also don't like it in terms of cultural reasoning, because it's designed, as you point out in your research, to keep us addicted and to keep us from focusing on things that are enriching mind, body, and spirit, and instead just focus on sort of flashbangs to keep our brain focused on our tiny screens instead of doing anything meaningful with our lives. But TikTok, it seems like it's here to stay. Trump doesn't want to get rid of it because he's winning the youth vote, and I think that he's determined to come up with a scheme to keep it around. So what do we know about the current TikTok deal, and are you satisfied with it?
I think it's a step in the right direction. I mean, look, I think you laid it out pretty well. There are several issues related to TikTok. You can put them in two baskets. One is the issue of just this app that it sort of dumbs down your mind. It's addictive. It's just video loop after video loop.
On purpose.
And the problem is,
that's the point of it.
Yeah, exactly right. That's why it's so addictive, and that's the point of it. And by the way, you can't get that in China. They have a different version of TikTok that is much more scientific experiments, culture. It's not, people in blue hair dancing around. So they, I think, recognize the problem. But the challenge that we face is if TikTok went away tomorrow, somebody in the United States would invent a replacement that would do the same thing. So that's a deeper cultural question of how do you deal with these destructive, I would argue, social apps. The second basket of issues deal with the fact that this is a China government-run app and its ability to fuel propaganda and to serve the strategic objectives of Beijing. That is an issue that I think Trump is trying to deal with. And what I've seen so far is encouraging. I haven't seen all the details. Essentially, what would happen is that TikTok would revert to majority U.S. ownership. And you've got some pretty big names in the tech space that would be involved there. Again, I'm not an apologist for big tech. I have problems with big tech as well. But at least, unlike the Chinese, they are accountable. You can take the owners, have them sit in front of Congress and ask them questions under oath about what they're doing and how they might be manipulating people. You can actually subpoena them if there's criminal conduct involved. You can't do that in Beijing, China. So this is a movement, I think, in the right direction. It takes this powerful app out of the hands of the Chinese government and the CCP to spread pro-CCP propaganda. But I think we need to still see the details. The key is that all-important algorithm. That's what addicts people. That is what is so influential. That's what's so predictive in giving you what you want, even before you know you want it. And the plan is that would be licensed to the U.S. company TikTok from ByteDance, which is the Chinese parent company that owns TikTok right now. It would be licensed to the company, and it would be subject to their review and their editing to make sure that nothing nefarious is going on. Again, the devil is in the details, but you've got some pretty big names in the tech space like Mark Andreessen and others that are, I think, serious people that recognize the problems in the tech world, certainly aren't Chinese apologists. So all of that, to me at this point, is very, very encouraging. The bottom line is if TikTok went away tomorrow, either Chinese ownership or something else, it will be replaced by another app. There is no way that we are going to be able to sort of shut this down and prevent people from getting access to these social media products. And that's part of the challenge that we face.
Okay, so a couple follow-ups. First of all, what does a good deal look like to you? What is the essential components of a good TikTok deal?
Well, I think number one, that it's under U.S. control. What the details they've talked about so far, it would be 80% U.S. ownership. The board of directors, all the seats on the board of directors, save one, would be by an American. And again, these are pretty well-known people in the tech space who know what they're doing. So number one, actual control of the company. That would be majority U.S. Number two, the all-important algorithm, that you have the ability, that there's transparency and that there's knowledge, and that it can actually be studied to make sure that it is not pushing pro-CCP propaganda, which it has been doing. So again, there's some encouraging news there that it appears this is not going to be a situation where the algorithm is not subject to review by the new TikTok. They would actually be able to review it and potentially edit it if needed. And then I think number three, transparency to the new American ownership of who's on TikTok, and to make sure that pro-CCP social influencers are not getting advantages from the company in spreading the propaganda. And I think all three of those so far seem to be headed in the right direction.
Okay, well, that's a positive. Yeah, and so for me, I always think about how it just feels like, of course, the fact that China does not allow for their own citizens to engage with this app because they know how destructive it is. They have a different version for their own citizens is such a big tell that we shouldn't be spending a lot of time on it. But there's this whole cultural phenomenon that's taking place where it feels like we are getting differentiated from the actual experience of being a human. And it's not that, the old expression, Twitter's not real life. No, it's becoming your online avatar is real life, and your actual lived human experience that's the fake thing, and the real thing is your online persona. And it's getting very dark and dangerous because you're seeing some of it with these extremely online killers. The individual who shot up all the children as they were praying in Minnesota was clearly someone who lived mostly a virtual existence, not someone who was really a person as far as we could tell in the real tangible tactile world. It was just a series of online memes. And then you've got the Charlie Kirk's suspected assassin, who also seemed to have a similar existence, where mostly being online, radicalized online, engaging in strange fantasies that are probably not to be taken 100% literally online, and ends up in this situation where he's incredibly godless and incredibly violent. And it's just this is new. This is all stuff we're just starting to deal with. And I think some of the app addictions are not helpful to people. I mean, we're seeing the rates of depression in younger people. It's so high. There is some data to suggest that people are spending maybe a little less time on some of these apps in some cases than they were in the past, because maybe people are realizing it's terrible. But where are we at on this weird experiment rewiring our brains from your vantage point?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed the larger issue here, Alex, which is when you're dealing with these apps and people that are spending time on them in sort of an unfiltered way and not really interacting with other people. I mean, think about it this way. If you are living a sort of normal life, you're going to a coffee shop, you're going to a place of employment, you're going to a church or a synagogue, you're going to a bar with friends, you're going out to dinner or a restaurant, you're coming in contact with all kinds of different people, and you're having all kinds of experiences. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative, but they're not subject to your control. You can't curate them. If you're in the online space, it's a funnel. You're going to get what you want. If you want sort of darkness and let's say sort of raw, sick humor, oh, we'll give that to you 12 hours a day. We'll give that to you 24 hours a day. And so that is a huge problem, particularly for these individuals that are out seeking it. The question is, and I don't know where we are as a society on this, the question is, what is the responsible thing for our society to do? The libertarian in me says it's none of the government's damn business. I should be able to spend as much time online looking at stuff as long as I'm not. On the other hand, the other part of me says, look at the human heart and look at the human spirit. You know what? This is like poison. This is like cocaine for your brain. Maybe we need to consider some restrictions. I don't know that we do, but I'll tell you, for example, in China, Douyin, which is their version of TikTok, by law, for kids under the age of 18, at 10 o'clock at night, it automatically shuts off. Yeah. And it will warn you if you are on it, for more than 30 minutes. It will warn you, hey, you've been on this 30 minutes. You've been on this 40 minutes. It will warn you to try to drive you and move you away from it. We don't have any of that in the United States. So it may be time to start considering parts of it. If you are in the Marlowe home and you're growing up with two loving, responsible parents and you're a kid. Yeah. They're probably going to be fine. If you're growing up in a single family or with parents that are distracted and don't care, you are vulnerable to all this stuff online. Maybe we need to start thinking of ways in which we can provide some regulation and restriction so they don't get swamped with this stuff.
And the parents are a part of it. I was at a restaurant yesterday with my wife. It was, I would say I wouldn't say it's upscale, but whatever's one notch below upscale. And it's a chain, but it's a nice chain. And I mean, this is a nice Sunday afternoon if you're eating in a place like this. And the family next to me, it was the dad on the phone, the 14-year-old kid on the phone. I mean, it was just, they're all sitting there on the phone. I mean, this is just, this is why you work all week, is so that you can go to a place like this on Sunday and have a great time. And it's just like, there's no interaction at all. And it was, you see it all the time. You see it's constant. You see these things and it's disturbing to witness, and then people are doing it in public.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think particularly, to the point you raise, Kate, somebody who's 35 years old, they can kind of do what they want. They're a parent. It's what you're seeing in a lot of the cases with these shooters, as you mentioned, with the depression. You're talking about younger people. You're talking about teenagers, maybe people in their early 20s. There is something, I think, to be said for protecting people who are, under the age of 18 from this kind of poison. We certainly don't allow them to smoke cigarettes. We place restrictions on other things that they can do that are in a physical, tangible nature. I think you can certainly argue that this online stuff is as destructive, if not more destructive, than some of the things that we already restrict. So at least maybe with younger people, we need to have some kind of a restriction placed on the amount that they consume and the quantity of time they can spend online with this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there's a good segue here, because one of the people who's buying a big stake in TikTok is apparently Larry Ellison, who I think has kind of tasked his son David, who's I think a little bit older than I am, which running his media portfolio. This is at the same time that he's, I guess, basically taking over CBS News, and they've installed Barry Weiss as the editor-in-chief there, a person who has never been very impressive to me. I think she's taken a lot of our ideas, Peter, that we had 10 or 15 years ago, but just packaged it as a liberal lesbian woman, and that has somehow made it so that everyone thinks she's a genius. But that's okay. I've said this repeatedly on the show. I think this is a huge improvement over whatever was there before. And I'm looking forward to what she does. And if it doesn't work, that'll be great content also. So I'm all for it. I think it's a great idea. I've said this specifically on the record, though I don't think she's some sort of a sage genius the way she's talked about. That said, big things are happening with the Ellison family, who maybe is the richest family in the world now, or top 2 or 3. What do we know about them? You're someone who is well aware of what the billionaires are up to. What are we to know about the Ellisons?
Yeah, I mean, Larry Ellison basically built Oracle, and that's the source of much of his, I'd say probably 80-90% of his wealth. And he's done it, I think, by creating great products. He's also done it, a lot of government
Can you
contracts.
Summarize what Oracle does for people who don't know exactly?
Man, you know me in technology. It's basically the guts of the internet, right? So they don't make computers, and they don't run web pages. They make the guts that basically help the internet work and help companies and individuals operate in the space. And of course, they're big in data centers now too.
Yeah, databases, cloud, fiber optics. I mean, just the stuff that it's the underlying, I guess, infrastructure that you would need to actually have an internet. Yeah. So
it's basically the guts and the muscle tissue of of that body. And they've also had a pretty good relationship with the Chinese government over the course of decades. That's been a big source of growth for them as well. So there's some things to be concerned about there. He tends to, I think, not have gone for the woke part of Silicon Valley. He's somebody who seems to be politically to the right. I do think that there are some very legitimate antitrust questions that come up in terms of the size and scope of things that they're involved in. But I would also say that, a lot of the antitrust stuff that might have applied 20 years ago doesn't really apply much anymore, right? CBS News does not have the influence it had 20 years ago. It doesn't drive the news narrative the way that the networks did 20 years ago. So I do think that there's probably going to be some antitrust issues that come up. I'm not terribly worried about it because, again, I think the marketplace of the way in which people consume news and where they get their news has so radically changed that if somebody controlled ABC and CBS, I'm not sure that it would warrant, stopping those transactions from going through. So I think the Ellisons, compared to a lot of the woke stuff that we've seen in Silicon Valley, are a refreshing ownership. But I would also say that, when it comes to antitrust, we should be concerned and make sure that nobody is dominating those spaces. If they, in fact, become owners of TikTok through this deal, and there are other partners involved, that does give them a huge amount of influence over how people consume news. Because I saw a recent survey, 25% of the American people say that they get a significant amount of their news from TikTok alone. So that's something we should be watching.
Yeah, and it also makes me think, do you have any potential to go on TikTok? Because I'll say something, I haven't even shared this with the audience. I did ask John Cassio, who at Salem is helping me post on social media. I gave him the go-ahead to put some of my content on TikTok. Let me see how I'm doing. I do not have a lot of followers yet. But I have not tried. I've even mentioned it to my own audience. But I'm curious if this is a reality. Charlie Kirk got millions and millions of people. I think part of the reason people were so upset when he was killed was because of his TikTok audience. I really think it was a big thing. So it's not a joke. A lot of people on there. What do we do?
And a lot of people on there. And Alex, also, it's a very personal format. I think what the reason that you see so much of an outpouring for Charlie Kirk emotionally, I mean, you certainly knew him as a person, so that sense of emotion and sadness and sorrow is very real and genuine. It's also very real and genuine for the millions of people who never met him that just would watch his videos on TikTok. That's the power of this medium. It really does forge a bond between the producer and the consumer, and you can reach millions of people. So I'm not on TikTok. Part of it is because I don't understand it. Part of it is my skepticism with the CCP. But I would say it's a good step forward for voices like you to be on TikTok, because you can form that bond. And look, at the end of the day, this sale is either going to have to go through or TikTok is going to die on the vine. And I think the Chinese do want to at least get their ownership stake, get paid for what they put into this over the years. So I'm optimistic the deal is going to go through.
I'm really interested to see, Peter, because you've had some great CBS 60 Minutes appearances over the years. I'm curious if they're going to reach out to you and bring you into that fold. That would be pretty cool. It's you'll let me know if that happens, because
the return tour. Yes, that would be fun.
Yeah, I would dig that. I would love to see what they would do with a little, give Peter Schweizer a little budget, a little more exposure. Okay, I got some international stuff I want to get to with you, but you have a great tweet thread at the top of your Twitter as we're recording today at Peter Schweizer on who's funding Zohran Mamdani. I'm trying to make sense of him just also in the broader context of Democrats right now. You've got the House Minority Leader is in New York. We are all talking about Mamdani, who is just repackaging old ideas that have never worked, but he has his name's Zohran Mamdani. He is a young, good-looking, but definitely not alpha presence with fake veneered teeth. Millennial. It's quite the package for these old communist Marxist ideas that they're putting out there with a very happy face while he does it. And it just feels like we're doing it in New York. We're going full socialism. And who is bringing this? Are they bringing it on themselves? Are the New Yorkers really doing this? Do they just keep electing the worst people, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, look, I keep saying I just can't imagine that this guy's actually going to win. But I mean, the polls seem to indicate that he is. Even if we consolidate around Andrew Cuomo, God forbid.
No, we can. I do think that's part of it. Then I'm going to let you run. But this is my big point, is that I think that Mamdani's more qualified than Cuomo, because you can't have a policy where you get countless people killed and then just get elected again, as he does. Yeah. It's actually worse than on paper I'm a Marxist. Is like in reality, I had policies that got a lot of people killed, and I won an Emmy for it. And then I felt up the Emmy and called it buxom to my staff and made sexual suggestive comments about the Emmy. Yeah. Like that to me is actually worse, but maybe I'm alone in that regard.
No, I mean, I think you make a great point. And that's part of the problem is you've got this massive city in America, and the alternative to Mamdani is Cuomo. I mean, seriously, that's the best they could come up with. And yet we're there. Look, what I find interesting about the Mamdani case is not just the socialism, and not just, as you correctly point out, that socialism is somehow the new idea, when in fact it is really the oldest economic idea in human history. There's a great book written years ago called The Socialist Phenomenon by this Russian intellectual. I'm trying to remember his name. And he talks about the fact that all of the world's ancient civilizations, the Mayans, the Egyptians, they were all socialists, the way that they ran things. So the notion that socialism is the new idea is about the most ridiculous thing you could come up with. But what I find even more compelling is this is an election that is being watched worldwide. And as I point out in the Twitter thread, Hezbollah, the terrorist organization in Lebanon, their paper actually ran a story on the mayoral race in New York, and they talk about what a great opportunity this is for them and for Muslims around the world to capture this large city in America. And they talk about Mamdani could be mayor of New York, and from mayor of New York in a future administration, he could become head of the Department of Homeland Security. He could be vice president of the United States. So you've got Hezbollah of Lebanon looking at this. You've got radical extremists. I talk about this in the Twitter thread that have sent money to his campaign. You've got the Iranian government ran a glowing picture in one of the glowing story in one of their newspapers about Mamdani and how the core of his constituency are Muslim voters in New York. You've got radical imams who went on YouTube a couple of years ago and said, wouldn't it be great if we could find a dynamic young Muslim candidate in New York because they could win because of immigration and everything that's happened in that city? Sounds pretty prophetic. So this is something that is not just about Democrat, Republican. It's not just, this has global implications. And you've got a lot of radicals and foreign governments that are lining up behind Mamdani because they see it as an opportunity to sort of create a breach in the United States and to advance their interests. And I think if you look at what Mamdani has said and what he believes, they have good reasons to be optimistic that from their standpoint, this is going to be a big win for them. And I just don't know what New Yorkers are thinking. I mean, I know people in New York and I know generally how they're going to vote, but I just can't understand how, people that live in New York, generally you think of them as they're pretty ambitious, they're pretty smart. And yet what you find is that the guys that are, running the car service business, the guys that are, running the little bodegas, they don't want Mamdani to win. They recognize the failures of socialism. The ones that are voting for him are the guys that work at Goldman Sachs, the guys that work at boutique investment funds, the middle managers. That's where Mamdani's drawing his support. So it's an indictment of our education system. It's also a terrible situation for New York. And I think we continue to see the decline of a city that I have loved in recent decades, but don't really feel comfortable being there anymore.
Yeah, I haven't been since the pandemic. And it's interesting because I endorse Mamdani, and I won't tell you exactly how much tongue in cheek it is. I'll tell you it's not zero. It's definitely not zero. But some of it's the visceral dislike I have of Cuomo and not seeing the math for Adams or Sliwa very early on. And I was looking at I was sent by people who don't like, even though of course I'm not being 100% literal with this endorsement. It's based off of these particular set of circumstances we have. But people were sending me this Douglas Murray article from the New York Post over the weekend making the case that conservatives can't be accelerationists with New York. And he quotes Scott Bessent, who's on the same team as me, which is very cool because he's a brilliant guy. But then also George Will agrees with me, which is not great because I don't tend to go with George Will these days. But I'll tell you something that's absent from the article, which has a lot of good arguments and people can go look it up. He doesn't talk about Cuomo at all. Cuomo gets one reference and it's actually in a Bessent quote. And that's a real thing here, is that you guys had to put up someone else in New York and we can't have a single quality politician in a city of 8 million people. I just don't get it. I don't get how that could be the case.
Well, I think, Alex, to your point, everybody in that election, almost everybody in that election is voting on Mamdani. They're voting for Mamdani or they're voting against Mamdani, which means they're voting for Cuomo. Very few people are saying, we think Andy is the guy to run the city and he's got this impeccable track record. So that's kind of where we are today. Again, I think the argument against, the accelerationist view here is the ability to do so much damage as mayor of New York is tremendous, and damage that, because Mamdani is not just, in my mind, thinking about local New York politics, like, running it as sort of some corrupt scheme where I can get the ward guys elected that I want. He's got a global vision. And there's a lot of stuff he can do in the city of New York to make life terrible for people outside of the city. So that's the only thing that gives me hesitation to say, let New York get what New York wants and let him be elected.
So, Peter, it's important to talk about the Israel. I know there's a hard pivot, even though Mamdani, I think, would be pro-Hamas, there we go. We'll make a not entirely clumsy pivot. This might be our October 7th episode, depending on when I put this out, because I'm on the road this week, as I've shared with the audience. And we're on the verge of Middle East peace, could be moments away. You were our big peace editor, which was Andy Breitbart's first national security and international relations group blog about 15 years or so ago. So you do have a lot of expertise in this area as well. I know, like me, you lean in the pro-Israel camp, but I want to go big picture. I want to do forest and trees as usual. So in terms of trees, what do you think of the proposed peace deal from Trump, and do you feel like that it could actually bring peace to the region for the first time and beyond my lifetime?
Yeah, I mean, I like what is in the proposal. And the reason I like it is because, number one, it brings everybody to the region in to the table with a stake. So the idea is that you're going to have Israel withdraw, but you're going to have peacekeepers from surrounding Arab nations. That's probably going to be Egypt, probably Jordan, a few others that will come in to maintain peace. But number two, what's so important about this is Hamas is required to disarm. Now, the devil here is in the details. The proposal put forward by Trump says they disarm everything, artillery, rockets, but also, the rifles that they're carrying. Hamas has come back and said, well, we'll give up maybe the rockets and the missiles, but we want to keep the rifles. And the reason they want to keep the rifles is that's how they maintain their political power in Gaza. If they have to give that up, they're screwed. But I think that needs to be a non-negotiable. And I do think that the mood in Gaza seems to be towards, we want peace, we want a peace agreement. So if Trump can pull this off, I know there have been a lot of people who, say he should get the Nobel Peace Prize. I always think that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. When it comes to this absolutely, I think, would be transformative to the region. It would give Israel the security it wants. The bottom line is Israel does not want to occupy Gaza. They used to occupy it. They gave it up in 2005. They walked away from it. And of course, Hamas held one election, which they won, and then built up their terrorist network. So Israel's walked away before. They do not want to occupy Gaza. They had to go in there because of the damage that had been done to them, the people that had been killed, the hostages that were being held. If there could be an arrangement whereby countries like Jordan and Egypt step up and help maintain the peace in that region, that Hamas is defanged and eventually kicked out of power, that gives Israel what it needs. It also gives the region stability. Because one of the things you'll notice, Alex, is countries like Egypt will talk about the Palestinian cause. They don't want to take any Palestinians. They don't want Hamas. They don't want people from Gaza coming into Egypt because they recognize that the instability it will present for their own government. So this is an opportunity to actually try to deal with the root of the issue and root of the problem. The real question is going to be, is Hamas going to feel so much pressure that they have to go along with this deal, or are they going to try to wiggle out of it? And that's really going to come down to the Gulf states, countries like Qatar, putting the screws to them and saying, no, you need to go along with this deal.
Okay, so let me ask you about how we got here, because we're 2 years since the October 7th terror attacks, and which were, just seem to get worse for me every time I revisit them, more shocking. And yet it feels like Israel's never had worse PR than they have right now. Even at Breitbart, which is, I've said half jokingly that we actually have it easy because everyone knows we're pro-Israel, so we're not people aren't disappointed if we aren't being so easy on Hamas. But we throw up a post on Mike Huckabee saying that Israel and the Jews will never stand alone, and it just immediately the whole page is flooded with just pro-Hamas propaganda, basically, in terms of the comment section. And I'm just wondering what's going on here, if you see anything different, because online anti-Semitism has always been a real thing. It just feels like it's really accelerated lately, even as Hamas has continued to use human shields, continue to hoard aid and try to sell to their own people, continue to try to manipulate media in order to try to get some sympathy for themselves. And not to mention, October 7th is really, really recent. 1,200 people died, and it was pretty brutal the way they were killed. What's kind of changed in the Western media landscape, in your view, if anything?
That's a good question. I think, look, at the beginning you asked, why are we here? And I think the reason we are here and the possibility of this peace exists is because Israel has been doing a fantastic job of killing members of Hamas. And that's what they should be doing, because this is a war situation. And I think there have been some voices on the right. I'm not going to name them. I think a lot of us know who they are, that I think have been completely irresponsible and lack basic understanding of history in accusing Israel of genocide for what it's doing in Gaza. It's not genocide. What Israel is doing in Gaza is very similar to what the United States and the Allies did in World War II, or what we did after the World Trade Center, Twin Towers went down in 2001. You can criticize and say we should not have gone into Iraq, but when countries are attacked, what you should do is protect your people, and you protect your people and you respond by going and killing the enemy. And sometimes that gets very messy because they hide behind people, they hide rockets in schools, all of those things. But if you're going to call Israel's behavior genocidal behavior in this context, then you've got to look at every war the United States has ever fought and say the United States committed genocide every time. This is the way that wars are done. And Israel has worked very, very hard, I think, to minimize civilian casualties, something that Hamas never, ever, ever does. So we are in this situation because Israel has gone forward and has pressed forward in an unblinking way. And I say, God bless for them doing it, because that is the only prospect you have for peace. What we do not want, I don't think Israel wants it. I don't think the rest of the region wants it. And certainly I hope the Western world doesn't want it, is to go back to the status quo where Israel disengages, Hamas tends to its wounds. In 5 to 7 years, we are back in the same situation where Hamas is conducting strikes against Israel or carries out another major terrorist attack, and Israel has to go in there again. That is not where we want to be. So Israel, by taking the fight to Hamas in such a direct way, with the attack in Qatar on the leadership, has basically said, we're not doing this anymore, guys. That has brought us to the point where this negotiation and this peace agreement is a real possibility. And I think that should be encouraging for all of us.
Do you see any criticisms of what Israel could do better? Because my friend Charlie had said in the last couple of months before he was alive, before he was killed, he had criticized the way Israel had conducted their PR for the war, which I thought was reasonable, because it doesn't seem like they're doing a lot to help themselves in that regard. Is there anything else that you feel like that people are just not understanding that they should be understanding?
Well, I think you're right. I think the PR has not been terribly good. And I think that a lot of the people in the Israel community have been kind of shocked by the criticisms and where the criticisms are coming from. And again, I mean, Breitbart has run stories on this all the time, and rightfully so. It seems particularly interesting to me that you have some voices on the right and some on the left who are particularly exercised about this issue, but they don't really raise a stink when Christians are killed in Syria. They don't raise a stink when Muslims are killed in Syria or in other parts of the Middle East. They take a particular interest in this issue. I'm not saying that this is part of a foreign influence campaign. I think you do have people online who are just trying to be provocative. They're trying to find an audience. But again, what I think Israel has done is what I certainly would expect the United States to do. Because let's remember, 1,200 people in the context of Israel's population. Magnify that to the U.S. population in proportion. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans being killed. And we're going to just kind of say, that's just terrible. No, I mean, you would unleash the wrath of the United States, and rightfully so. And that's what Israel's done. And I think they've done it in a very surgical way. So I would just encourage people who are hearing these voices to actually look through history, the way in which wars are conducted, how combat operations are conducted, the efforts that Israel has done, not perfect, but the efforts that Israel has undertaken to minimize casualties, and they fit very, very comfortably in what the Western world has done when faced with situations where they've been attacked.
Wonderful stuff. Peter, what else can I share with the audience about stuff you're working on? Anything you can tease for us?
We are continuing to research Mamdani, the source of his funds, the possibility. I'm not saying we've confirmed anything yet, but the possibility of foreign funding of his campaign.
Wow.
So we're going to continue to look at that. I think you should also keep in mind there's not only the Muslim interest here, there's also a Chinese interest in New York. Let's remember there's a guy named Roy Singham. I featured him in my book, Blood Money. We've written about him at Breitbart a lot. Roy Singham is an American Maoist who made $1 billion, moved to China, where he lives now in Beijing. He is behind a lot of the radical groups in New York that are supporting Antifa and other violent protests. His daughter is now running a group called Jews for Mamdani. She is actually not Jewish, but that doesn't seem to get in the way. But I think that there is a particular Chinese interest as well in Mamdani winning because of the positive implications for them as it relates to their activities in New York.
I will say the last drill down episode, and I don't know, there might be a fresh one by the time this runs, but the last one I was with Steve Bannon, and you guys were talking about the Lawfare, and you guys got me all jacked up. I wanted to haul in all the judges, but do you think realistically we can impeach and remove judges, Peter? Because I've been talking about this a lot the last few months with breaking the law out. But do you think we could impeach and remove the rogue judges? Do you think that's possible?
I think it's possible. The question is, you've got to have people on Capitol Hill that are prepared to confront them and call them out. And I'm not saying that every time a judge makes a decision you don't like, but look, there's some really egregious examples where they are simply saying this is unconstitutional, knowing based on the precedent from the Supreme Court that they're going to be overruled, but they don't care because this is a way of kind of, causing the wheels to turn more slowly in the Trump administration. So I do think that federal judges can absolutely be subpoenaed and asked to sit in front of congressional committees to answer questions. And why that is not done is truly shocking to me. So I think that's the first step. Get them before a congressional committee under subpoena, ask them questions about their thinking, why they did this, the fact that the court's overturning their decisions, and then judge their competence and their ability to do the job. And if it seems to be wanting, then absolutely they should impeach them. We have to get past the notion that Congress and the executive branch are accountable, but the judiciary is somehow untouchable. They are accountable, and if they are incompetent or they are egregious in their abuse of power, they need to be called out and held into account as well.
I have to say, I love the idea of bringing them in, questioning them, making their lives difficult because they would do that to us. I think it seems unrealistic. We're going to get to 2/3 majorities to remove these people. But you know what? Let's make them go through all the stuff we went through, because they would and will do the same thing to us going forward. All right, Peter, we'll leave it there. Amazing stuff. Drill Down podcast. All of Peter's books are excellent. You should read them all if you haven't already. And we'll hear from Peter soon. Thank you, Peter. Government Accountability Institute, GAI. Support them. Support their work. They do great stuff. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you
next
time.